Hello, everyone. For our third module, Research Integrated Teaching, we'll be discussing the interplay of AI in the teaching practices, especially that AI is now everywhere and classroom teaching is not immune to its impact. These are questions people might have, and we do have with us today Rose. The first question, and Rose, please. How should students use AI effectively and responsibly? How do teachers support students to figure out how to do so? And how do you set the boundaries for students to use AI effectively, but also responsibly?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. I'm actually going to start with the instructors. I think it's important for them to be transparent with students on when and where it is appropriate to use AI. Always go back to your learning objectives for the course and share those with the students for the course or the assignment. You have to explain to the students where AI would be beneficial and where it may be at odds with what the students should be learning based on those learning objectives. While a statement in the syllabus is definitely essential, it's something that you can't it's not just add it and leave it alone. You have to come back to the use of AI in all activities and assignments because the students will not know what to do and they might do the wrong thing erroneously, or a lot of them may have anxiety over it as well. So you want to make sure that you go back to AI and address it, and through that process, you're teaching them how to use AI effectively and responsibly. On the student end, it's hard, right? But don't be afraid to ask your instructor, is this an appropriate use for AI? Is it not? And your instructor will hopefully, come back and be honest with you. It's important for students and faculty to have an open line of communication about all this. AI is moving so quickly that it's always best to check in, and it will be helpful for both parties involved.
Thank you very much. I think if I want to follow up with that, I would say that teachers must encourage the idea that AI should be used as a supporting tool and not a replacement for this trio, which is critical thinking, creativity, and academic integrity of students. The best approach to address the responsible usage of AI is to demonstrate its limitations. And I think this is the best way I've seen people understand AI more, is to unveil its pitfalls, address the responsible usage of it. They should not only stop there, of course, but also suggest strategies and ways by which they can still use AI responsibly, where AI's task is only to support the generation of ideas and content. The more students resort to AI, even for brainstorming, like we sometimes take that for granted, but brainstorming is very important for creativity of students. Their creativity starts to diminish and can even be questioned at times, since AI content can be very fascinating for the intimidating for students who have regular thinking mind of a student, but such thinking should not be encouraged. Of course, instead, students should not look at AI and feel imposters. Instead, they should feel that they have far more original, authentic, ethical, and personalized thoughts than AI will ever be able to produce. It is also important for teachers to agree on the do's and don'ts of AI, specifically what are students allowed to do and not to do with AI. In my classroom, for example, I do allow my students to use generative AI to, for example, like refine the LinkedIn about section. They're not natives of English, so we allow that, but after giving, writing it themselves and thinking themselves, and then, that final touch to refine the content is allowed.
Sam, I know that you've experimented a lot with AI in your classes. What are the best ways to educate students to better see its pitfalls, as well as utilize its strengths while keeping the use ethical?
I'm going to build on what you said earlier, keeping an open line of communication and finding out what your instructor wants and finding out what your students are doing. If you know what's happening, you're more likely to educate and support. And if you're a student, you're less likely to get in trouble. Also, on what Omaima said a moment ago, I take the idea of making sure students know what they're doing, that I give them the boundaries and guidelines. I take that one step further and what I do is to help students explore for themselves. For example, fundamentally, I ask students to learn by doing, not only learn what AI does, but also learn what AI doesn't. I do not lecture students about what not to do as much as I actually expose them in its sometimes hilarious ways as to what AI does and doesn't. For example, I generate images of fake animals in front of them, and then they go, oh, that doesn't exist. So don't lecture AI, hallucinate this, that, right? Just generate a fake animal. Or I ask students to write a biography of themselves, And it writes a brilliant biography that kind of fits if they give just a little clue. I'm like, okay, if this is true of everybody, probably not true of you, right? And that's not really original or creative or critical. And then we do all of these things so that we break the tools until we laugh at it and we just say, oh my God, this is not what I thought it was. And those revelations are much better than lectures or fear or punishment. Do not use fear, punishment, or lectures, because your students are going to go far beyond where you are. They are smarter than us. If we stop them, they'll find ways to use it in a way that helps them learn, that helps save their time, save their energy, gives them confidence. Those things will happen anyway. So you might as well change the dynamic and use some of these techniques. And the second thing I would say is, it is not enough to only do that, because if you help students to explore AI without a little bit of these guardrails, what can begin to happen is the students become really wowed by AI. So yes, you can make it fail in front of you a few times, but when students use it, they'll go back to wherever it actually does the assignment, where it actually does the writing, where it actually does the research, what it actually does all of these things. So they might not trust you when you show the boundaries. They may say, I'm in a safe zone. Yes. Here's what happens in the safe zone. Instead of making students think the hard way, it will say, we will do the hard thinking, you do the smart thinking. And that's it. They won't read, they won't research, they won't synthesize, they won't cite, they won't engage, they won't figure out a problem. They will just ask AI for content. And if it looks good enough, it's good. So the challenge is not only to make sure they're exposed to the fake animals it generates, but also to make sure that they can judge the content. So I give them 5 or 7 questions as they explore. One is, does the AI tool seem to have adequate underlying data? If they're researching on a very unique topic on which there's not a lot of information on the internet or academic databases, then they should talk to someone about it. If it is something about themselves, they should know better than AI tools. Whether it's personal, original, whatever, local, contextual, cultural, the content may not be adequate. Second is, does it seem to have enough ability to think in the divergent, critical, creative, culturally sensitive ways, context-aware ways? That is the boundary we should be pushing with ourselves when we use ourselves and with our students. The third and most important factor is the wow factor. The wow factor is, if a student is wowed, they may be wowed because it saved their time. They may be wowed because it saved their energy and frustration with coming up with a good idea for a paper. They may be wowed because the AI knows better than they do. But the objective in a classroom, in a course, in a university, is for students to know, not for an AI to know. And therefore, we really need to help students to push these boundaries. And they need to understand that if they don't know how to use AI tools effectively, they may be impressed, but they may not be really reaching the standards. And therefore, it's important to explore in an open setting the limits, but it's not enough to only expose the limits. I think it is necessary to explore the limits even in the context of particular assignments and not simply generally. I'll stop there, but I have started basically moving away from simply adopting an AI punishment or policy into providing guidelines and then translating the guidelines into class activities and conversations. Then I have moved away from simply updating the assignments and making AI secure. Doesn't work, don't even try. To integrating support throughout the assignment process so that students can explore in the context of that assignment and they can feel like, I can judge AI content. I can make it transparent. I can say how I use AI. I can be honest and ethical. Instead of policing students, I really started adapting my own assessment. If students gain that confidence, receive that support, and don't feel like they need a crutch, they don't feel like they need to follow a drunk uncle, I think that day they become educated. And I think if students feel like they can do that, they will not be wowed by whatever content AI provides, but rather learn to do the things that they need to do with the help of AI, but knowing the limitations and pushing themselves as far as it takes to find the limits of AI. And sometimes, even when my AI does not have limits, they should not use it. This is my final point. Not use it, because using it makes them lazy, uncreative, unoriginal, and therefore they should also know when to avoid AI, such as for drafting the first draft, such as for doing something that would be ultimately dishonest in the eyes of another person. So those are some of the notes. I was a little all over the place, but those are some thoughts about from my experience. I do have a question for Omaima, which is how do we engage faculty in the awareness and the limitations of AI, specifically generative AI, such as when we use it as teachers when preparing or teaching our courses?
I'm going to speak from my own experience. I think, at least from my experience, each one has their own perspective about AI. Some educators romanticize it, and they still do. And others are afraid of it, while others use it in discretion and choose to see it as this non-ethical tool, but I'm not going to tell anyone that I'm using it. Both perspectives, or all perspectives, are, I think, a product of not knowing enough about AI, how it is created, how it operates, and its imperfections as well. So I believe educators should go through the same process we talked about students should go to, is to learn how the limitations of AI, to unveil the truth behind AI. And the same strategy that we use with students is that, and I believe also that at the institutional level, faculty should have a common and agreed upon policy and how AI can be used inside and outside the classroom. I remember years ago, when I was in school, nobody has ever questioned if you copied content from the internet and submitted it as your own report, you get a grade regardless. Until I grew up and then joined academia and learned that plagiarism is a thing. You need to cite people. You need to make sure that someone actually wrote that and you cannot steal it. And it's a process. Someone developed that process, and then it started to be standardized over everyone. And I think it's just a matter of a couple of years until something similar is going to be developed for AI as well. I don't know how it will look like, but I'm sure something is going to happen in a similar way. And I know a lot of, at least in the field of research, a lot of journals and big companies are requesting people to claim, I used AI for this and that, but there is not much clarity over how that can be used. So I still believe this standardized model of approaching AI will definitely help students understand the framing of AI usage, but also collectively thinking of ways to save the trio I talked about earlier, the creativity, integrity, and critical thinking in an era where everything really is not helping it grow, but diminishing it.
I definitely agree with everything that Mama said. And I really think that faculty need to keep talking about it, right? But until we get this standard, until we have a policy, we need to keep talking about AI with each other, with our students. It's important for faculty to keep this conversation going, how they're using it, when they're using it, why they're using it across disciplines, to see where the differences lie. That way, we can all learn as a community from each other, right? It's moving so quickly that we need to sort of crowdsource this information with groups of people that we trust, and groups of people that are, working, have the sort of the same thought patterns around AI as we do, and a little bit outside of that. We definitely want to see other people's points of view, but mostly with other faculty and other instructors that we trust in this area. It's very important to keep the conversation going.
And I have the final question, actually, for both of you, that our colleagues may have, which is how can we use AI? Can we use AI, right, in and for teaching? Are there areas where we might avoid? Are there areas where we might learn to use? Are there areas where it is completely harmless? It's ready-made, right? And what should be any limits for our own use of AI as teachers?
I think this will change as time goes on, depending on what the tool, where the tools are going and how the tools evolve and how we evolve as a society to a certain extent. I think right now and moving forward, transparency is the key. You want students to know. You don't want to know when the students are using AI. Well, they should know when you're using AI too. If you used it to create your rubric, if you used it to, brainstorm some new questions for an exam, I think it's important to share that information with your students. I think it's important that you do not take your student work either and put it into chatbots without the students being aware of this or give permission for this. I think that is very important. It's the student work. We're thinking about privacy. We're thinking about ethics. We have to look at student work as, them owning it. Just like you would tell your students, I don't want you putting my content into a chatbot without without me knowing about it. I think that's an important conversation to have with your students, especially, I'm sure it's important to you too. It goes back to just how you're using AI ethically, and that's a great conversation to start with.
Umayma?
I mean, of course, I join Rose, and I can say that sure, it can be used, but again, responsibly. Many AI tools can be very engaging and fun, like using, AI making videos or images to help envision your future career for students, or this AI tool that can help you turn your LinkedIn account into a podcast and you can listen to it. It kind of motivates people to feel like confident. I'm doing great. These are areas I need to develop in, and it's nice, it's good, and also it does not impact the trio I talked about earlier: the creativity, critical thinking, and integrity. I would also say I think this is very important for educators not to engage in the loop of using AI to create assignments, then students using AI to do the assignment, and then the professor uses AI to correct the assignment and assign a grade. And who is at the center of learning? I mean, educators tried for ages to shift from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. And I think if we allow AI to take over, then we're going to go into an AI-centered classroom, and I don't think we don't want to do that. So yeah, let's not allow AI to be the boss of the learning experience.
Thank you very much. That was very thought-provoking. Thank you, Rose, for your time today. I hope our colleagues learn from this, but I was really struck by the idea of the AI-centered classroom. Imagine that for a second. The teacher is using AI, and the student is using AI, the college is using AI, and imagine a situation where we have automated and everything is automatic. Everybody goes home. No learning happens, no teaching happens, and no advancement of research happens. Doctors use AI to, instead of gathering data from the actual patients, they use AI from generated patient data. Not to analyze the data from real patients, but use AI generated patient data to treat patients and kill them? Or who takes responsibility, right? It's a crazy world. I think that is a very good imagery. That's a very good metaphor for all of us to think, what happens if I become part of a very dirty game? And as long as we can convince our students that they should not become part of a dirty game, and as long as we can model that behavior, that character, honestly, transparently, and with some knowledge, skills, and value system, we can actually inspire them to figure it out. I would say again, we don't know yet. There's a lot that is still happening, right? And in 10 years, our whole concept, originality and creativity may also shift a little bit, right? We never thought we would be buying products online, right? We never thought we would be, storing information and retrieving information through the internet. We never thought about, the computers, right? See how they have completely fundamentally changed how we do things and knowledge work. But that doesn't mean that we just run with it, right? Just because there's a car, we get on it and just don't pay attention to the seatbelts or our highways or our rules of the road. In the field of education, whether learning is happening or not is important. Whether students are becoming capable or not is important. Whether they can talk without AI, write without AIs, engage each other without AI is important. If they can do it without AI, and I think it's okay to do it with AI, but for someone who cannot put two and two together, I think it's really dangerous.